chapter 25, verse 31, we find the following. And I want you to hear some of the words that I'm going to use. I'm not going to read the whole piece here, but I'll read a good portion of it. So as you're hearing some of these words, think about what you're hearing. You shall make a lampstand, or a menorah, of pure gold. The lampstand shall be made of hammered work. Its base and its shaft, its cups, calyxes, and petals shall be of one piece. So that cups, calyxes, and petals. Okay. 6 branches shall issue from its sides, 3 branches from one side of the lampstand, and 3 branches from the other. On one branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like the almond blossoms, each with calyx, petals, and on the next branch there shall be 3 cups shaped like almond blossoms, each with calyx and petals, so for all 6 branches issuing from the lampstand. I'm going to stop there because I think you'll probably, what are the words that you hear? What do they resemble? Nature. Yes. And how can we get a little more specific? A tree. Absolutely. Now, the lampstand, the menorah, is supposed to look like a tree. This is a version of it, right? What do you do with a menorah? You light it on fire, right? You light candles, or in ancient times it was oil, right? We didn't have, wax candles like we do today. You used oil, right? You light a tree on fire. Does that resemble anything? Burning bush. So we go from this menorah. It's a tree. Torah is called a tree of life for the Jewish people. By studying it, it gives us life. So there's that symbolism that the menorah is meant to symbolize a tree. And then when you light it on fire, the burning bush, which was when God first spoke to Moses. So now we've talked a little bit about Jewish art. Let's talk a little bit about Jewish prayer. So what is Jewish prayer? Rabbi Jonathan Slater, in a book called Making Prayer Real, written by Rabbi Mike Cummins, says all prayer, when we pay attention, whether personal or liturgical, is ultimately a form of speaking the truth. It makes us aware of what is going on in our lives in this moment so that we can see clearly and respond appropriately. So according to Rabbi Jonathan Slater, prayer is about paying attention to the world around us. It's also about a form of speaking truth. Sometimes that truth might even be a little bit uncomfortable. Prayer is a response to what is going on in our lives. Rabbi Cheryl Lewart teaches us that prayer changes and affects the person who prays because prayer opens the heart. Prayer lets down the barriers between our intimate longings, our private pain, our anxious clutching fears, and everything else. The very interiority of prayer, of a prayer experience, even prayer as brief as wow, opens and exposes our tender hearts. So when we take a moment to pray, we break down the barriers that we tend to keep private. There are times when we have great fears, but prayer opens us up to that moment of vulnerability, which prayer can speak to us, change us, and affect us. When our congregants enter our sanctuary for prayer, they will find a prayer book. In Judaism, the words of the prayers that are in the prayer book are called the Tikvah. That's Hebrew for fixed. Those are the fixed prayers that we would say each and every time we pray. But the rabbis also believed that it wasn't just enough to pray the Tikvah, to pray the fixed prayers, right? Because if you just pray the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes rote. It might become a little boring. You might have no feeling with it. So the rabbis introduced a concept called kavanah. Kavanah is often translated as the word intention. Sometimes it is direction. Right, I've actually used an arrow and a target here to decide that, right? Because when we have direction, when we have an intention or an aim or a focus, it influences us in a way that is meaningful and profound. Rabbi Miriam Klotz explains, I relate to prayer as an action that we initiate from our humanness. It is an offering or a practice, a gathering of intention or kavanah. The Hebrew word for sacrifice is korban, coming as it does from the same root as the word for coming close seems apt. In ancient times, before Jews would gather in synagogues like we do now, we were a temple-centric religion. And when I mean temple-centric religion, I mean the holy temple that stood in Jerusalem. In ancient times, we would bring an animal or some grain, something to offer. And the ancient priests who would work in the temple would be the ones who were responsible for preparing and making that offering. When the temple was destroyed, the rabbis of the time said, we can't be temple-centric anymore. We're going to start studying Torah, and we're going to be a Torah-based religion. And we're going to build what we would call synagogues, which is a Greek word, by the way, or comes from Greek. In Hebrew, we would call it like a Beit Knesset or a Beit Midrash or a Beit Tefillah, which is house of meeting, house of prayer, and house of study and house of prayer. And in those houses of prayer, we are going to gather to pray. We no longer can make offerings. So how are we going to come close to God? Well, we're going to create a prayer book. And so the rabbis began to create what we know today as our liturgy, often infused with themes from the Bible and other ideas that have been expressed over time. But they also said we have to bring a sense of kavanah. Just as the priest in the ancient temple would have to focus on the offering, we as individuals are going to have to focus and bring our intention. Because if we're in the synagogue and we are focusing on our prayers and we're worried about what we have to purchase at the supermarket later, are we really praying? And so there is a tradition that said the rabbis would actually sit for an hour and prepare to pray before they actually prayed. So the kavanah is something that is meant to help give us a sense of focus. This is a picture of an old prayer book from the 14th century. The words that you see here are from Psalm 118, but you can see artwork. We're going to blow this one up. We're going to inflate it in a second. But this word here is Baruch, which means blessed. You see on this side here, this says Hodu, okay? And if you look closely, you have faces, you have all this, you have animals. This here says Yahalelu, I think, is probably the best way I would translate that word. But you have certain words that are depicted in a very artistic way. So let's look at this one here, and I'm going to give you so this comes from, like I said, the 14th century. It's from the Hamilton Siddur. It's a very, very famous manuscript that we have. The Hebrew says, Ana Adonai Hoshiana. Please, God, help us. Adonai Hitzlichana. Give us success. Ana Adonai Hitzlichana. Right? Give us luck, give us blessing. Blessed is the one, and that's what it says on the bottom part of this page here. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Eternal. Ana Adonai Hoshiana. We use this psalm is part of a liturgy called Hallel, which means a psalm of praise. We will often say this specifically on certain holidays. We say it on Passover because we are grateful, a psalm of praise, for God rescuing us and coming to our aid. We have a picture here with horses. Perhaps what we're understanding here is the idea that God might have given us the strength to overcome some of the challenges that we might have faced. So you can imagine yourself perhaps praying these words in your Siddur, and if they're just the Hebrew letters, maybe you don't have anything to focus on. But when you add in the art, it gives you a sense of understanding to give you something to have focus on, to have purpose. Another form, this is actually not from a prayer book, but this is the top half of the page. This is the bottom half. This is this is Bereshit. This is a depiction of creation, something that I had said before. You have a really beautiful design of the Hebrew letters, and you have animals here, all sorts of animals, perhaps. I'm not even, giraffes, I'm not 100% sure. You have birds down, I think, at the bottom of that. And then you have other animals down here. But the idea here in studying this page, which doesn't come from Siddur, but probably comes from some type of Chumash, which is a book of study of Torah, has the art which really amplifies the text in a way to give it more meaning. And you can even see that the text itself, which I could read for you if it were clearer, but the image is not so clear, gives you a sense of additional meaning to understanding God's role in creation and the images of creation. On the left-hand side, we have a page from an old Passover Haggadah. Again, with art. Now, I want to explain to you the tradition before we talk about what's on the page. When Passover comes during the year, Jews will often clean their homes out of from leaven. We don't have bread, right? You've seen probably the matzah displays in the supermarkets, less so on this side of town, much more so in the Bexley area, but historically the Kroger here up the street does have a matzah display, but it's not so easy to find Passover foods, I will just say that. But we clean our house, and there's a ritual, and I love this ritual, because what we do in our family is we take little, crouton-sized pieces of bread. We'll place them in the house the night before the Passover Seder, and we'll take a candle and a feather in what we call bidikat chametz, which is the searching of the leaven. And we take the feather, and we've preset them, right? So we know where they are. We take our kids, we go around the room, we take the candle and the feather, and we're looking up. There's the bread. Let's take the brush of the feather to brush the bread into our bag. And then we have our collection of bread, and then we don't do this part, but you're supposed to burn it as a way of really getting rid of the chametz. So the Hebrew here, and you can see it. I can't actually read it on my computer. It's too small. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al bior chametz. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who has commanded us in the searching of and ridding ourselves of chametz. Interestingly enough, the rabbis also teach us that not only are we ridding ourselves of the bread, but chametz is actually the thing that makes us all puffed up with too much pride. And so the removal of chametz is actually a way to honor humility. But you can see at the top of the page here, this picture, right? By the way, this word it says or, which means light. And then you have this picture, which I tried to blow up here, make it a bit bigger, but you have like a cupboard in a house. And this is it's probably easier to see up here, but that's a feather and the candle. And he's searching for the bread, right? So you have the idea here to give some intention, to give some focus, and to give a sense of purpose to the prayer and to the act of searching for chametz. So I want to shift. That's old prayer books. This whole thing kind of goes away with the invention of the printing press. It makes it easier to mass produce books, right? So the printing press does a great thing because it mass produces books and gets the books into everyone as opposed to just the elite who could read. But perhaps on a downside, it takes away from the artistry of the book. So when my friend Rabbi Dan Medwin believed that we needed imagery to help us find the intention in our prayers. So for years, I learned this skill probably in 2009, 2010. We created what we call visual tefillah, or visual prayer. We actually did this here. Many years ago, there was a Friday night service where we had to create a prayer book. We did a movie script here. I was part of a panel, and we needed to create a prayer book. Well, we did this here because I wasn't bringing all my prayer books for everybody. We had a packed house. But this is a prayer that we greet Shabbat called Lecha Dodi. Come, my beloved, to greet the bride. Come, my beloved, to greet Shabbat. So this is a prayer that we say. Shabbat, the Sabbath, is likened to a bride in Jewish mystical teachings. And so when I created this slide, this image, I took what I found to be a beautiful image from, this is my friend's daughter's wedding. I had the honor of officiating, but that is a chuppah where a bride and a groom or a couple getting married would stand underneath the chuppah and do that. And you actually can see my friend's daughter under the tree in the back. This is in a greenhouse, by the way. This was July 2nd. It was 100 degrees that day. It was very hot. So when we're singing, we would put an image like this up on the prayer book to make it so that we could have that intention, that reminding ourselves that this is about a wedding. This is about a sacred union as we arrive on Shabbat, a sacred union between us and God. We would then move to a prayer. This is called the Baruch Hu. This is considered an invitation to prayer, saying, we would chant the first lines and saying, it's basically like, please join me in prayer. And the second line is basically saying, yes, we are ready to pray. This is an image of Jerusalem. And why I think it's so profound to create a picture like this for our prayer is because in every not every synagogue, but most synagogues in the Western Hemisphere face east, face Jerusalem, because our hearts face east. So when you can create an intention to say, our hearts are directed towards Jerusalem, you have this beautiful flowers, you have the old city of Jerusalem in the background, so our hearts, our minds are facing to the east. After we pray this prayer, we turn to a prayer for creation. I've focused on the evening prayers, which talks about like the evening. Actually, you can imagine the Hebrew is light rolling into darkness. So if you can imagine a sunset, you see the light and the darkness rolling into each other. This particular image is of the moon over Walloon Lake. Anybody ever go to Walloon Lake up in northern Michigan? It's a beautiful lake. It was Hemingway's lake, by the way. We spend a week here every summer. My mother-in-law took this photo, and you'll see. So this is the prayer we pray. One of our interpretations of this prayer: praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. You can see that she's taking a series of photos here. Your breath guides the sail of the stars, creator of the tide of time and light. You guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows, right? So you kind of could see the series of evenings setting through. And I'm able to do that through the creation of the slides, through the program I use on my Mac. Same prayer, just a different text of the English, but you can get a sense. I would have used something like this, just a beautiful image of a sunset. This prayer is our prayer for revelation. I'm not going to read it because it's up there, but the idea of all these things your Torah gives to us, the more time we devote ourselves to it, the more it grows and gives, right? So this is about acknowledging our receiving of Torah. Anyone kind of want to guess what kind of tree this is? It's a cherry blossom. Now, I couldn't find any pictures of almond blossoms, But when I was creating this slide, the idea of Torah, I was thinking cherry blossoms. The flowers, I believe, of an almond blossom are very, very similar, but the idea of a tree, Torah being a tree of life, the cherry blossom, like an almond blossom, trying to evoke the sense of the menorah in that slide, which symbolizes Torah. This prayer is one of the most familiar prayers in Jewish tradition. It's the Shema. I don't have a translation here, but it means, listen, Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. So the themes are Israel is a proclamation of Adonai as our God. There's a sense of listening, perhaps, so you can imagine if yourself at the shores of the sea, you're listening to the sounds of the waves. You are connected with the oneness of the universe. So I chose this. And I will say, like, relating back to COVID, we would sit on computer, and these are the slides that I would show. And so as we are singing many of these or reading them, this is what our congregation would see. I only stopped doing this in the summer because I kind of personally got tired of praying from a computer screen. I really wanted to pray from my prayer book again. This is another prayer. What do you see here? Path through the woods. You see the beautiful flowers. This says, you shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might, right? A later part of the prayer says that you should, you actually shall walk with these words wherever you go on your way. So that's why I chose a path. What I would do is I would change some of the slides for the season. So if we were still using slides, this is one that I would do now because it's more evoking fall, where this would be spring. And I have ones for winter as well. I might have carried this one through the summer. And then lastly, we have our prayer for redemption, which was the parting of the sea. So you have a pathway through water. This is the song that we would sing. That's according to the Torah. You have a pathway through the water. How would we get from one side to the next? Is one symbol, maybe a more literal symbol. And then occasionally, maybe because the prayer expresses freedom, I might have shown a picture of the Statue of Liberty, because that is one of our symbols of freedom. So I think what, kind of going back, if you trace, from something like this to something like this, you can kind of get a sense of the moving from this sense of freedom, this sense of might, to our understanding and our focus here, right? Like when you see this, it might make us think a little bit about our own freedom. Many of our members have families who immigrated, or ancestors who immigrated to the United States and passed through the Statue of Liberty and saw the Statue of Liberty on there. So it might even evoke a family connection as well. And so we were able to really use, take the concept of what was then an illuminated prayer book with the art, and turn it into something like this as a way to give people something to focus on to help them understand. So we now, because we used it really weekly for like 3 years, we'll bring this out for special moments, because like I said, I personally want to pray from the prayer book again. It's just a little bit easier than having to maneuver all of that when I'm leading prayer, but it's really quite a meaningful addition to services. So I'm going to stop here, and I want to invite you to ask any questions about what you saw, anything else. Yeah, and I'm going to repeat the questions. Oh. Okay, let me give you, I'm going back to my slide where we can see a good spelling of that. Okay, so the question is, names of God. I said Adonai, and the question was, there's the name Jehovah. When is that used? So let's first start, where does the word Jehovah come from? And it comes from the interpretation of these 4 letters. In the Torah and the rest of the Bible, you will, by the way, in Hebrew, God has like 70 names. So that's just to start. There are many, many names of God. But this one is Yud He Vav He. Okay? If you were to put, there's no vowels in the Torah. Okay? If you were to vowel that, someone's interpretation would come out Yehovah. We actually don't know that that is how that's pronounced. Jewish tradition teaches us that the only person who ever knew how to pronounce that spelling, which we in kind of biblical scholars call the tetragrammaton, the only person who knew how to pronounce that was the high priest who lived in the times of the ancient temple. And he would only pronounce that name once a year on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. He would enter the Holy of Holies and offer his prayers to God. So some Jews won't even say Adonai because they feel that that is a name that should be reserved only for a moment of prayer. And instead, if it was like an Orthodox rabbi here teaching you, you would have heard me say or that rabbi say Hashem, because it just means the name, right? So we say that name as Adonai, which is often translated as Lord or Master, right? That's how you get that translation in the Bible. The idea that God is Lord is because the word Adonai, which actually does appear as a word in the prophetic books, Adonai, you will often see this word and that word appearing next to each other. And when that happens, you pronounce this word as Adonai and you pronounce the other word as Elohim. So that's a long answer to your question, but we never use the word Jehovah in any context whatsoever. From a biblical scholar perspective, you would not hear them use that word either. You would hear them spell it out in capitals YHWH. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question. Maybe it's more than you wanted to know, but but like I said, we have many, many names for God. El, Elohim, Shalom, several that we might use as a name for God. Yes. In the old prayer books. So the question is, who are the people who produce the art in those prayer books? I actually do not know the answer to that question. Yeah. So I would imagine that it were people who were somewhat educated, but also who had a certain level of skill, and could understand a little bit of the text. I don't know that it was rabbis or those who were leading, but if you think about 14th century, where that's 1300s. The at the time, the majority of Jewish life is, well, first of all, at that point, we're scattered in all over, from northern Africa to different places in Europe, even what we now know today is in Iraq and Iran, some in Israel as well. But the predominant part of the Jewish community at that time is in Spain. And we were able to flourish there, and so you probably had people who were just talented artists who they would ask to make that, and we clearly don't have sets of the prayer books that were left over, and it's not even clear to me that everyone who was gathered in prayer would pray. So I don't really know, but it's a really interesting question, and one that I'm going to perhaps have to look up, because I don't know the answer. Thank you though. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but it would not surprise me that this was something that came first in the Christian tradition, actually. Um, Other things in the Christian tradition, come from the Jewish tradition. But I mean, I'm going to, like, if you fast forward to the 1800s, where the Jewish community in Germany, you have a very much of the Jews have often been challenged of how much of our own identity do we keep, and how much do we want to look like the rest of the world around us, right? So if in Germany, you start to see a development of a liturgy that the sermons from the rabbis would no longer be in what they probably would have tended to speak in Yiddish. They would have spoken in German. There would have been a choir like there would have been in a German Protestant church. You start to see architecture of synagogues mimic the churches. The closest one you could probably go to in Ohio, which is beautiful, is Plum Street Synagogue in Cincinnati. If you have ever been there, that was built in the late 1800s by Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise. It is still in operation today. It is now known as it's Wise Temple, but you could visit there. There are tours. It's generally closed except on Shabbat and certain Shabbats, because that's the Jewish community has moved more up to Blue Ash. But my point is, architecturally, liturgically, sermonically, there are things that are starting to mirror the world around us. So this is something that could have certainly happened in the Christian world, that Jews said, oh, this is happening, let's do this. And I think there's a lot of that within the Jewish community, we have, at least today, we often have a lot of mirroring of what is happening in the community, in the world around us. Other questions? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So the art at Beth Tikvah is really, I think we have a wonderful group of I will call them, we have our art and design committee. I would just call them docents. They really are. They don't give tours necessarily, but they could. We've got quite a bit of art that I think is unique and special. I showed you one piece that's in our sanctuary. That same artist, and I wonder if it's on our website. She took the same style and created what looks like a Torah, not where it's scrolled out like you saw in that image, but where it's scrolled all closed and there's like a cover that covers it. But each part of the cover is a leaf. An individual leaf of metal etching, and then she uses wood, like a tree branch, for the handles and what's above the Torah. So we have that. There's just beautiful art. We have different art. We have a series that was recently donated to us about depicting scenes from the book of Job. When you come into the front of our building, you can see stained glass windows, which is interesting. You may or may not know this. Stained glass windows are supposed to be viewed from the inside, not the outside. So I did not know this until several years ago, but if you were to view them from the outside, everything would be backwards. I mean, the art itself wouldn't make a difference, but the Hebrew would be backwards. That's because it's meant to be viewed from the inside. The stained glass windows depict art a teaching that says the world stands on three things: on Torah, on acts of loving, on prayer, and on acts of loving kindness. And the idea is that those three things lead to holiness. And so you have different symbols in each window that depict. Each window is, one window is Torah, one window is holiness, one window is prayer, and the other window is acts of loving kindness. And so you have those images depicted in a certain way. And so we have a stained glass arc doors as well, which actually have no image, and it's really left up for interpretation. I see all sorts of things in there. But we really have beautiful art. If you wanted to come for a tour, I'd be happy to go through the art and do a whole walking tour and sitting in different places to teach about the various components of art. We have one of our members of blessed memory. Her name is Anne Slobodnik. She did a needlepoint of each of the Chagall windows that are in the synagogue in the Hadassah Hospital. And so there are 12 windows there, if you've ever seen pictures of that. Marc Chagall is a very, very famous artist from Israel. And he did one window to depict each tribe of Israel. So we have that as well. So we have all sorts of art. Our Torah covers that cover the Torah scrolls are artistic themselves, right? So kind of taking up the notion of Hidur mitzvah. Other questions? One or two more. Great. Thank you, everyone. It's I want to thank Kim for inviting me, for actually pushing me out of my own normal comfort zone to do a presentation, to do the research and do this. This was a lot of fun. And like I said, if you want to come for a tour, perhaps there's a way we can. You could do like a whole tour of the different houses of worship in the art. I'm sure that the others, especially on the square, have quite a bit of art too. But that sounds like a nice series in and of itself. And so we're all close by. You don't even need a bus. So thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to share with you all today. And I'll stick around for just a few minutes. I have someone who is going to call me, I think, in about 15 minutes. But thank you.